Jasmine's alarm chimed at precisely 5:30 a.m., though she was already awake, staring up at the ceiling. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of her white noise machine. She swung her legs over the edge of her bed, her slippers perfectly positioned to meet her feet. Her phone buzzed as she crossed the room, her daily calendar notification. Tuesday, October 10th, morning flight to Tampa, review client files on plane, arrival by noon, meeting at 2 p.m. She dismissed the alert and began her carefully choreographed routine. 15 minutes in the shower, 5 minutes to moisturize, 10 minutes to do her hair in a sleek ponytail. Her suitcase stood by the door, packed the night before with a color-coded wardrobe folded with military precision. The contents of her carry-on bag were organized by category: electronics, documents, snacks, each in its own labeled pouch. By 6:15 a.m., Jasmine was in the kitchen. Her coffee brewed automatically at 6 a.m., filling the air with the smell of freshly ground beans. She poured exactly 6 ounces into her travel thermos, no more, no less, and paired it with a granola bar she'd prepared over the weekend. Efficiency was her currency, and she spent it wisely. The ride to the airport was uneventful, as planned. Jasmine had told the car service to pick her up at 6:25 a.m. sharp, accounting for 25 minutes of travel time and an additional 40 minutes for check-in and security. She even had a contingency plan. If traffic was heavier than anticipated, she'd still have a 20-minute buffer to make her gate. By the time she reached the terminal, she felt the familiar hum of satisfaction that came with being ahead of schedule. People bustled past her in various states of disarray. A man frantically checking his watch, a mother trying to corral her children, a couple arguing over a forgotten boarding pass. But Jasmine moved through the crowd with the calm precision of someone who had accounted for every variable. She approached the check-in kiosk and scanned her phone. Her ticket popped up on the screen, and she selected her seat, 14A, a window, perfect for reviewing her notes uninterrupted. Security was another test of her efficiency. Shoes off, laptop out, toiletries in a clear bag. She flowed through the motions seamlessly, already picturing herself seated at the gate with her coffee and laptop, ready to finalize the day's schedule. But as she reached the gate, she noticed something amiss. The flight board blinked with a single word that made her stomach tighten. Overbooked. Her gaze flicked to the airline desk, where a growing line of disgruntled passengers was forming. Jasmine pressed her lips into a thin line, willing herself to stay calm. "It's fine," she told herself. "I planned for delays. I'll just speak to the agent and explain the situation." Adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder, she strode toward the counter, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She wasn't about to let a minor inconvenience derail her perfectly structured day. Not yet, anyway. Liam strolled into the airport with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 100 times before. His duffel bag hung loosely over one shoulder, the strap fraying at the edges, and his passport peeked out from the front pocket like it had just been shoved there moments earlier, which it had. He didn't bother checking the departure board. The gate information was somewhere in his email, and he'd get to it eventually. For now, he was more focused on finishing the half-eaten breakfast burrito in his hand. "Excuse me, sir," came a sharp voice from behind. Liam turned to see a woman in a blazer giving him a pointed look. He followed her gaze down to the salsa stain he'd left on the floor. "Oh, whoops, my bad," he said with an easy grin, grabbing a napkin from the pocket of his jeans and crouching down to wipe it up. The woman huffed, shaking her head as she walked away. Liam shrugged. "Tough crowd?" He muttered to himself, tossing the napkin in the nearest trash can before taking another bite. He loved airports. They were chaotic, unpredictable, alive, people rushing to make connections, kids dragging stuffed animals behind them, couples whispering arguments under their breath. It was all part of the show. Liam liked to think of himself as an observer, a player in the grand symphony of travel. And today, like most days, he was playing the part of the guy who could get through security with 10 minutes to spare and still make his flight. By the time he reached the TSA line, it was already snaking halfway across the terminal. Most people in line looked stressed, heads bent over their phones, eyes darting to their watches. but Liam just shoved the last bite of his burrito in his mouth and leaned against the nearest post, scrolling through his camera roll. He paused on a photo from his last trip, a narrow cobblestone street in Lisbon, the walls covered in vibrant tiles. His caption had been something poetic, something about finding beauty in the unexpected. It had gotten a ton of likes. Not that he cared about that, of course. Well, not much. "Sir, you need to remove your shoes," the TSA agent said, snapping him out of his thoughts. Liam blinked. "Right, yeah, sorry," he said, tugging off his sneakers and tossing them into the gray bin. His bag followed, along with his jacket, which probably had about 3 pens and 2 crumpled receipts still in the pockets. The agent gave him a look as the bag passed through the scanner, but said nothing. Liam shot her a quick thumbs up. Once he was through security, he had about 20 minutes until boarding. Plenty of time. He wandered into a duty-free shop, running a hand through his messy hair as he debated whether to grab a new travel adapter. His current one worked fine, most of the time. Then again, he'd been meaning to upgrade. As he stepped out of the shop, sipping on a coffee he'd picked up along the way, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the notification. "Overbooked," he read aloud, his brow furrowing slightly. A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. Well, this should be interesting. With an unhurried pace, he made his way toward the gate, coffee in hand, ready to see how the next chapter of this adventure would unfold. Jasmine's eyes narrowed as she clutched her boarding pass and approached the airline counter. The line of frustrated passengers stretched out like a snake, each person armed with grievances and pointed gestures. She glanced at her phone again. Boarding time had passed 10 minutes ago. This was unacceptable. Taking a deep breath, she composed herself, stepping up as the frazzled gate agent called, "Next!" "Hello," Jasmine began, her tone professionally polite, yet undeniably firm. "I was assigned seat 14A, but it seems there's been some sort of mix-up. I need to be on this flight. It's imperative that I arrive in Tampa today. I planned ahead and checked in early, so this must be a mistake." The agent barely looked up, typing hurriedly into her computer. "Ma'am, I understand, but the flight is overbooked. We're doing our best to resolve the situation. Please wait." "No, you don't understand." Jasmine interrupted, her voice rising just slightly. "I selected this seat hours ago. I have a confirmation, it's right here." She held up her phone, the screen glowing with the itinerary. "There must be something you can do." Before the agent could reply, a voice joined the conversation from Jasmine's left. "Actually, 14A is my seat." Jasmine turned sharply to see a tall, disheveled man with messy brown hair and a faded jacket slung over one shoulder. He held a coffee cup in one hand and a boarding pass in the other, his expression casual, as though he had all the time in the world. "Excuse me?" Jasmine said, her tone icy. "Yeah," the man continued, glancing at his boarding pass. 14A, window seat. I picked it when I booked the ticket last night." He shrugged, as if this explained everything. Jasmine blinked, incredulous. "Last night? Are you kidding me? I booked this flight weeks ago and checked in at 6:30 this morning. That seat is mine." Liam raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by her indignation. "Well, guess what? It's on my boarding pass, too. So maybe we should let the airline figure it out instead of you lecturing me about your schedule." "I'm not lecturing," she shot back, lips tightening. "I'm stating facts. Maybe if you planned ahead like a normal person, instead of throwing things together at the last minute, you wouldn't be in this situation." Liam smirked, taking a leisurely sip of his coffee. "Or maybe if you relaxed a little, you wouldn't be so wound up." Jasmine's jaw dropped. "Wound up?" she repeated, her voice dangerously low. "I'm efficient. You, on the other hand, are clearly just—" "Excuse me," the gate agent interjected, her tone sharp. "If you two could stop arguing for a moment, I'll explain the situation. Unfortunately, due to the overbooking, neither of you will be seated on this flight." "Neither of us?" Jasmine and Liam said in unison, their voices overlapping in disbelief. The agent nodded grimly. "We've already reassigned seats to passengers with priority status. You'll both need to visit the customer service desk to arrange alternate travel. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do here." Jasmine took a step back, her carefully constructed morning unraveling before her eyes. "This is unacceptable," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. I have a meeting at 2 p.m. This will completely throw off my schedule. Unacceptable, Liam echoed mockingly, tucking his boarding pass into his jacket pocket. Yeah, I think we got that. The airline screwed us both over, so maybe we should focus on getting to Tampa instead of assigning blame. Jasmine shot him a withering look. You're really one to talk about focus, considering the coffee stains on your jacket. Liam glanced down at the offending mark and chuckled. Wow, you're a ray of sunshine, aren't you? Don't test me, Jasmine snapped, spinning on her heel. I'm going to the service desk, alone. She emphasized the last word as if daring him to follow. Great idea, Liam replied breezily, falling into step beside her. Let me know if your clipboard and color-coded charts magically get us on a flight faster. Jasmine stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Do you even have a plan? Plans are overrated, he said with a grin. I improvise. Well, your improvisation just got you bumped from a flight. And your planning didn't exactly save you, did it? Her glare could have melted steel. Stay out of my way. Gladly, 14A, he said, tipping an imaginary hat before strolling ahead of her toward the service desk. Jasmine watched him go, her hands curling into fists at her sides. He was infuriating, completely insufferable. But as much as she wanted to shake him off, she had the sinking feeling that their paths weren't done crossing yet. The car door slammed harder than Jasmine intended, but she didn't apologize. She straightened her blazer, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. Liam slid into the seat beside her, with all the casual nonchalance of someone who hadn't just been bumped from a flight. He tossed his duffel bag onto the floor between them, the strap grazing Jasmine's ankle. Could you not? She snapped, shoving the bag aside with her foot. Relax, it's just a bag, Liam replied, leaning back against the headrest. He stretched his legs out, clearly unconcerned by the tension between them. The rideshare driver glanced at them in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowing at the palpable discomfort filling the car. Tampa, right? About 3 hours, give or take, he said, trying to ease the silence. Correct, Jasmine replied crisply, already pulling out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen as she searched for alternate flights, rental cars, anything that would salvage her schedule. Liam pulled his hat lower over his face, smirking as he watched her out of the corner of his eye. You know, maybe you should try enjoying the scenery instead of micromanaging every second. Jasmine didn't grace him with a response, though the sharp intake of breath through her nose said enough. She kept typing, determined to ignore him. I'm serious, he continued, his tone light and teasing. You're going to give yourself an ulcer worrying about stuff you can't control. Not that it's any of your concern, she said curtly, but I can control it. That's the point of planning, something you might want to try sometime. Planning? He chuckled. What's the fun in that? Half the joy of traveling is the unpredictability. You've got to let life surprise you. Funny how your joy of unpredictability got us stranded, she shot back, her eyes still glued to her screen. Liam laughed outright at that, the easy, unrestrained sound somehow irritating her even more. Touché, 14A. But hey, look at it this way. We're stuck together. Think of it as an opportunity for personal growth. Jasmine's glare could have frozen lava. The only thing I'm growing is a headache. The driver coughed awkwardly, clearly wishing for silence. Liam shrugged, unfazed, and turned to stare out the window. Jasmine gritted her teeth and kept scrolling. The car carried them forward, two worlds colliding under one tense roof, both equally determined to withstand the storm of the other. Jasmine stepped out of the taxi, her heels clicking on the cracked asphalt of the amusement park parking lot. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and surveyed the scene unfolding before her with a mixture of determination and unease. The park, once a local icon, had clearly seen better days. Faded banners with peeling paint flapped half-heartedly in the breeze, their promise of fun for the whole family undermined by their tattered edges. The faint smell of popcorn lingered in the air, mingling with something less pleasant, perhaps the scent of neglect. Pulling out her clipboard, Jasmine scanned the agenda for the day, the neatly typed schedule providing some comfort against the chaos surrounding her. She had been hired to whip this place into shape for the grand reopening event, And by the looks of things, it was going to take every ounce of her expertise. A group of workers stood by the entrance gate, arguing over where to hang a new banner. Nearby, a woman in a mascot suit struggled to put on her oversized gloves while a child tugged at her tail, giggling. Jasmine strode toward the park's main office, her pace brisk and her posture immaculate. A man in a neon vest jogged to keep up with her, clipboard in hand. "Miss Taylor, right? I'm Jeff, the site manager," he said, slightly out of breath. "Thanks for coming. We're, really glad to have you here." Jasmine gave him a curt nod. "Morning, Jeff. I've reviewed the initial project notes, but I'll need a full update on the current status. What's been completed, what's still pending, and what's falling apart." Jeff winced at her last phrase, glancing nervously toward a carousel in the distance, its striped canopy sagging precariously on one side. "Right. Well, let's just say we've hit a few snags." "Snags?" Jasmine stopped walking and turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Let me be clear, Jeff. This event is in 4 days. A few snags could turn into a complete disaster if we don't handle them immediately. I need specifics." Jeff shuffled his papers like a student unprepared for a pop quiz. "The Ferris wheel is operational, but we're still waiting on the safety inspection for the roller coaster. The food vendors are setting up, but a few of them are missing permits. And, he gestured toward a group of workers standing near a deflated inflatable castle. "We're having some issues with the kids' zone." Jasmine followed his gaze, her jaw tightening at the sight of the workers poking the limp castle with a wrench, as though it might magically re-inflate. "Noted," she said sharply. "I'll need a list of every vendor, contractor, and staff member on site. I want to know who's responsible for what and why anything is behind schedule. We'll meet in 1 hour to review." "Yes, ma'am," Jeff replied, his tone suddenly respectful. He hurried off, leaving Jasmine standing at the park's main thoroughfare. She took a deep breath and let her gaze sweep across the park. In its current state, it was a tangle of frayed wires and incomplete setups, but if she squinted, she could see the potential. The bright colors, the whimsical architecture, the faint echo of laughter from years past. It was all there, buried under layers of disorganization. She would fix this. She had to. Tucking her clipboard under one arm, Jasmine marched toward the nearest group of workers, her voice firm and commanding. "All right, team, listen up. We've got a lot to do, and not a lot of time to do it. Let's get started." Liam stepped out of the cab, one hand shielding his eyes from the midday sun. The amusement park stretched out before him like a forgotten dream, its faded colors and peeling paint whispering stories of better days. He slung his duffel bag over one shoulder and took a slow sip of his iced coffee, letting the scene sink in. Somewhere in the distance, the faint strains of carnival music played from an old speaker, warbling slightly as if it too had seen better times. "Perfect," he muttered to himself, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He pulled his phone from his pocket, the camera already open. He snapped a photo of the park's weathered sign. "Grand reopening, 4 days." The bold letters chipped and uneven. The charm of imperfection, he thought. His followers would eat it up. Liam crouched down to frame a shot of a rusting carousel in the distance, its horses frozen mid-gallop. "The ghosts of childhood summers past," he murmured, already composing the caption in his head. He liked to think of himself as a storyteller first, a blogger second. It wasn't just about the visuals, it was about the feeling, the nostalgia, the way a place could hold 1,000 untold stories. Standing, he scanned the area, his sharp eyes darting from one detail to the next. A group of workers hauled a tangled string of lights toward a cotton candy stand, their laughter punctuated by frustrated groans. A kid's squeal echoed as a test run of a roller coaster sent an empty car jerking along the tracks. Near the entrance, a woman in a slightly lopsided mascot suit posed for photos with a family, her exaggerated smile more endearing than polished. He approached a vendor setting up a popcorn cart, the smell of butter drawing him in. "Mind if I get a shot?" Liam asked, gesturing to the cart with his camera. The man shrugged, grinning. "Go for it." Liam crouched again, angling for the light. Popcorn. The great equalizer. No matter where you are, it always tastes like happiness, he mused aloud. The vendor chuckled, shaking his head. As Liam moved deeper into the park, he felt that familiar rush, the thrill of a story coming to life. He didn't just see a rundown park struggling to revive itself. He saw potential, history, resilience. His blog wouldn't just chronicle the reopening. It would capture the heart of the place. And maybe, just maybe, that story would surprise even him. Jasmine adjusted the strap of her bag as she stepped into the heart of the amusement park. The sounds of construction and last-minute preparation filled the air. Hammers pounding, walkie-talkies crackling, the occasional shout of "watch out" from workers balancing precariously on ladders. She was halfway to the food court when she felt it, the unmistakable prickle of being watched. Turning sharply, she spotted him. Liam. He was leaning casually against a lamppost, camera in hand, his attention seemingly fixed on a group of kids chasing bubbles near the cotton candy stand. But as if sensing her glare, he glanced up, his lips curling into that insufferable smirk she'd come to recognize. He lifted his camera, snapped a quick picture of her, then waved lazily with the hand holding his coffee cup. Jasmine's jaw tightened. "What are you doing?" she hissed, marching toward him. "Taking pictures," he said smoothly, lowering the camera. "You looked very determined just now. Thought I'd capture the moment." "You took a picture of me?" she demanded, stopping a few feet away. "Without asking?" Liam shrugged, his grin unrepentant. "Relax. It's not for the blog, just candid inspiration." "Delete it," Jasmine said, folding her arms. "Not a chance," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "You've got this whole boss lady and chaos vibe going on. I might frame it." Jasmine threw her hands up and turned on her heel, muttering under her breath about unprofessional, overgrown frat boys with cameras. She barely made it 3 steps before Liam called after her. "Hey, wait a second. You're welcome, by the way." She stopped but didn't turn around. "For what?" "For the compliment," he said lightly. "I don't throw words like boss lady around just for anyone." Jasmine turned, her eyes narrowing. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Immensely." She muttered something unintelligible and continued down the path, determined to put as much distance as possible between her and the infuriatingly relaxed travel blogger. But Liam, it seemed, had other plans. His footsteps fell into rhythm with hers, his long strides easily keeping pace. "What do you want?" she said without slowing down. "Nothing," he replied. "Just enjoying the atmosphere. It's a public park, you know." "It's a work site," she corrected. "And I have a job to do." Yeah, clipboard queen, saving the day," he teased, eyeing the neatly organized notes in her hand. "What's next on the agenda? Counting light bulbs?" She stopped abruptly, spinning to face him. "Do you have anything better to do?" "Not really," Liam admitted. "But hey, maybe I can help. Need someone to hold a ladder? Test out the bumper cars? I'm very versatile." Jasmine stared at him incredulously. "You're unbelievable." "And you're predictable," he countered, his grin widening. "But that's not necessarily a bad thing." She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, a loud crash echoed across the park. Both of them turned in unison to see a wooden sign leaning precariously against a vendor cart, its rusty nails scattered across the pavement. Jasmine groaned. "I don't have time for this." But before she could march over to fix it, Liam was already moving. He knelt beside the cart, picking up the nails and inspecting the sign with a practiced eye. "I've got this," he said over his shoulder. "You," she said skeptically, crossing her arms. "What do you know about fixing signs?" "More than you'd think," he replied, pulling a multi-tool from his back pocket. "Spent a summer in high school working for a carnival. Long story." Jasmine watched, half impressed, half annoyed, as Liam adjusted the sign and hammered the nails back in place with the handle of his tool. Within minutes, it was standing upright again, albeit at a slight angle. "There," he said, stepping back with a satisfied nod. "Good as, well, not new, but good enough." "Do you always carry a multi-tool?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Only when I plan on running into damsels in distress," he quipped, winking at her. Jasmine rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress the small smile tugging at her lips. "You're ridiculous. And yet strangely useful." He tossed the multi-tool in the air and caught it, tucking it back into his pocket. "So what's next?" "Next, I go back to work, and you find someone else to bother," she said briskly, turning away. "Come on," he said, falling into step beside her again. "Admit it, you're impressed." "I'm tolerating you," she replied, though there was no heat in her voice. They walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of the park buzzing around them. Jasmine's eyes darted to her clipboard, scanning her list for the next crisis to address. But her focus was interrupted when Liam suddenly stopped, holding out an arm to block her path. "Wait," he said, nodding toward a booth to their left. "You've got to try this." Jasmine followed his gaze to see a vendor handing a customer a swirled cone of cotton candy. "What? Cotton candy?" "It's a classic," he said, already pulling out his wallet. "You can't be in an amusement park and not eat cotton candy." "I'm working," she reminded him, but Liam was already buying 2 cones. He handed one to her with a grin. "Consider it a peace offering," he said. "Truce?" Jasmine hesitated, then reluctantly took the cone. "Fine, but don't think this means I'm forgiving you for the 14A fiasco." "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, taking a bite of his cotton candy. "So how is it?" She took a small experimental bite, her expression softening despite herself. "It's fine." "Fine?" Liam repeated, feigning offense. "This is nostalgia in edible form. Lighten up, 14A. She couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. "You really don't take anything seriously, do you?" "Sure I do," he said, his tone suddenly sincere. "I just know when to enjoy the little things." Jasmine looked at him, her guarded exterior wavering for just a moment. There was something about the way he said it, the way he looked at her, not with mockery, but with genuine curiosity, that made her pause. Maybe, she thought, there was more to Liam than she'd given him credit for. Maybe. But then he smirked again, and the moment was gone. "You've got cotton candy on your nose," he said, gesturing. "Ugh." Jasmine wiped at her face, glaring as he laughed. And just like that, the simmering tension between them returned, a crackling energy that neither could quite ignore. The air smelled faintly of fried dough and hot asphalt as Jasmine strode toward the park's main office, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She clutched her clipboard to her chest, her face set in a focused, determined expression. The grand reopening was only 2 days away, and every minute counted. She had no time for distractions, least of all from Liam, who, thankfully, seemed to have wandered off to do whatever it was travel bloggers did when they weren't getting in her way. Jasmine pushed open the door to the office and stepped inside, the cool blast of air conditioning brushing over her skin. The temporary office was cluttered, papers strewn across the desk, a half-empty coffee cup perched precariously on the edge, and a stack of brochures teetering on a filing cabinet. It was chaos, and Jasmine's fingers twitched with the urge to organize it, but she wasn't here to tidy up. She was here for answers. "Hi, Miss Taylor." Jeff, the site manager, greeted her with his usual nervous energy. He stood behind the desk, a phone cradled between his shoulder and ear as he scribbled something on a notepad. "1 sec. Yeah, okay, I'll follow up with the vendor. Thanks." He hung up and turned to Jasmine with an apologetic smile. "What can I do for you?" "I need an update on the owner's availability for the interview," Jasmine said briskly. "I still haven't received confirmation, and I need to finalize the timeline for the event." Jeff hesitated, glancing down at his notepad as if it might provide a shield from her piercing gaze. Yeah, about that." Jasmine's frown deepened. "What?" "Well," Jeff scratched the back of his neck. "I just got word that there's someone else who's also vying for the interview. Apparently, they've been in touch with the owner directly." "Someone else," Jasmine repeated, her tone sharp. "Who?" Before Jeff could answer, the door swung open behind her, and in strolled Liam, his signature casual grin in place. He held his camera in one hand, his duffel bag slung carelessly over the other shoulder. Jasmine stiffened at the sight of him. "Hey, Jeff, just checking in about the interview schedule," Liam said breezily, completely ignoring Jasmine as he stepped around her and leaned against the desk. "Any word from the big guy?" Jasmine blinked, her brain struggling to process what she was hearing. "You?" she spat, spinning to face Liam. "You're the someone else?" Liam's grin widened, clearly enjoying her reaction. Guilty. Her clipboard thudded onto the desk as she crossed her arms, her voice brimming with disbelief. "You're going after the interview with the owner?" "Of course I am," he said matter-of-factly, setting his camera down next to her clipboard. "It's a great story. Small-town amusement park gets a second shot at glory. My readers love this kind of thing." "This isn't about your readers," Jasmine shot back, her voice rising. "This interview is crucial for the event's success. It's part of the official program I'm organizing. Well, it's also crucial for my blog, Liam countered, his tone light but his eyes sharp. And last I checked, you don't own the rights to the guy's time. Jeff cleared his throat nervously, glancing between them like a referee stuck in the middle of a particularly volatile match. Maybe we can work something out. There's nothing to work out, Jasmine interrupted, her gaze locked on Liam. I've been coordinating this event for weeks. I've put in the hours, the effort, the planning. You can't just swoop in at the last minute and hijack a critical piece of the program. Liam tilted his head, his grin never faltering. Hijack? That's a little dramatic, don't you think? Besides, I'd argue that telling this park's story to a global audience could do more for its success than some neatly color-coded schedule. Jasmine bristled, taking a step closer to him. This isn't just about publicity. It's about creating a seamless, memorable experience for the guests, something you clearly know nothing about. And you clearly have no idea how to connect with people beyond your precious spreadsheets, Liam shot back, his grin finally slipping into something more serious. You can organize all the events you want, but if no one cares about the story behind it, what's the point? Jeff held up his hands, his voice cracking with desperation. Okay, But neither of them was listening. You think this is a game? Jasmine said, her voice low and dangerous. This isn't some spontaneous road trip or last-minute blog post. This is my career, my reputation. And you think this isn't my career? Liam retorted, his tone matching hers. I've built my platform from the ground up. I tell stories that matter, stories that resonate. This interview isn't just a headline for me. It's a way to showcase what this park really means to people. That's funny, Jasmine said, her lips curling into a cold smile. Considering you didn't even know this park existed until 2 days ago. Liam opened his mouth to respond, but Jeff finally snapped. Enough, he barked, slapping his palm on the desk. Both Jasmine and Liam turned to stare at him, momentarily stunned into silence. Look, I don't know how you two managed to turn this into a boxing match, but here's the deal. The owner decides who gets the interview. Not me. Not you. Him. Jasmine and Liam exchanged a heated glare before both turned their attention back to Jeff. When is he making his decision? Jasmine asked tightly. Jeff sighed, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Tonight. He said he'd review both of your proposals and let me know by tomorrow morning. Proposals? Liam raised an eyebrow, looking vaguely amused. Didn't realize we were running for office. Jeff ignored him, addressing Jasmine instead. If you want my advice, use the time to make your case. Convince him why you're the right fit. Jasmine nodded sharply. I will. Me too, Liam added, his grin returning as he grabbed his camera. May the best storyteller win. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. Oh, I intend to. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the office, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. Liam followed a moment later, whistling softly to himself. The rivalry had just been officially declared, and neither of them had any intention of backing down. The faint hum of the park's carousel drifted through the air as Jasmine stood behind the food court, staring at her clipboard but unable to focus on the words in front of her. Her conversation with Liam earlier still echoed in her mind, a frustrating mixture of his infuriating smirk and his maddeningly insightful retorts. She shook her head, trying to push him out of her thoughts, when Jeff appeared, his face drawn tight with unease. Miss Taylor, Jeff said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Can I talk to you for a second, privately? Jasmine frowned but nodded. She followed him a few steps away from the bustling park workers, her brow furrowed in curiosity and irritation. What is it, Jeff? I'm on a tight schedule. Jeff hesitated, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Look, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think you should know. Liam's been, talking to some of the park staff, and not just about the interview. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Well, Jeff began, scratching the back of his neck. Let's just say he's been asking questions about you, about your role here. I overheard him mentioning something about you being too buttoned up and how it might be affecting the event's vibe. Jasmine's stomach twisted. He said that? She asked, her tone sharp. Jeff nodded quickly. I thought it was strange since you two seemed to be working things out, but yeah, he said it. For a moment, Jasmine stood frozen, her grip tightening on the clipboard. Doubt crept into her mind alongside a simmering frustration. She thought, briefly, naively, that maybe Liam's carefree charm had hidden something genuine. But now it felt like she had been played. "Thanks for letting me know," she said flatly, turning on her heel and walking briskly away. Across the park, Liam leaned against the railing outside the Ferris wheel, scrolling through his camera roll. He'd just taken a particularly good shot of the park's entrance at sunset, the golden light softening the worn edges of the sign. As he reviewed the image, a man in a neon vest, one of the park's staffers, sidled up to him. "Hey, you're the blogger, right?" the man asked, his voice casual but carrying an edge. "That's me," Liam replied, slipping his phone into his pocket. "What's up?" The man glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "Just thought you should know. Your friend Jasmine? She's been saying some things, to Jeff, about how you're not taking this event seriously, how you're here for your own gain and not the park." Liam blinked, his easygoing smile faltering. "She said that?" "Yeah," the man said, nodding earnestly. "Heard it myself." Liam straightened, the words sinking like stones in his chest. He thought for a moment that maybe Jasmine had started to see him as more than some washed-up travel blogger. But this? If it was true, then maybe he'd been wrong about her entirely. "Good to know," he said stiffly, turning away and heading toward the main office, his thoughts swirling. By the time they crossed paths near the carousel an hour later, the tension between them was undeniable. Jasmine's clipboard was clutched tightly in her hands, and Liam's typical grin was nowhere to be found. "Funny seeing you here," Jasmine said coldly, her words laced with sarcasm. "Not as funny as hearing how I'm apparently ruining your precious event," he shot back, crossing his arms. Her eyes flashed, her voice rising. "Excuse me? You're the one going around undermining me with the staff." Liam stared at her, stunned. "Undermining you? That's rich, coming from someone who's been telling everyone I'm just here to milk this for my blog." Jasmine opened her mouth to retort, but the words died on her tongue. Her mind raced, connecting the dots, the sudden whispers, the conveniently overheard comments, the perfectly timed doubts. She stared at Liam, realizing with a sinking feeling that they'd both been played. "Wait," she said, her voice quieter now. What if someone's feeding us lies, trying to turn us against each other?" Liam frowned, his defensive stance softening. "What are you talking about?" "Think about it," she said, her voice growing steadier. "Who benefits if we're too busy fighting to focus on the interview or the event?" Realization dawned on Liam's face. "The rival," he said, almost to himself. "Someone else must be after the interview or trying to sabotage the event." Their eyes met, the anger between them replaced by something else. Unease, understanding, and just the faintest flicker of trust. "We've been set up," Jasmine said, her voice flat. Liam nodded. "Looks like it." For a moment, neither of them said anything, the weight of the revelation settling between them. Then, without another word, they turned and walked side by side toward the main office, ready to confront whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the park as the chaos of the day slowly settled into a tense lull. Jasmine stood near the carousel, her clipboard balanced against her hip, scanning the long list of tasks that still needed completing. She tapped her pen against the paper, her thoughts racing. Despite the progress they'd made, it still felt like there was an insurmountable mountain to climb before the grand reopening. Footsteps crunched against the gravel behind her, and she didn't need to turn to know who it was. Liam's presence was impossible to mistake. The easy, unhurried stride, the faint scent of coffee and whatever cologne he'd half-heartedly thrown on. "Before you say anything," she started without looking up, "I'm not in the mood for sarcasm, jokes, or unsolicited advice." Liam stopped a few feet away and folded his arms across his chest. "Good thing I came with none of the above." "Well, mostly," she sighed, finally turning to face him. "What do you want, Liam? I've got a million things to do, and I don't have time for another argument." "I'm not here to argue," he said, his voice softer than usual. He held up both hands as if to signal a ceasefire. "Look, I've been thinking. This whole rivalry thing, it's gotten us nowhere. We've been working against each other when we could be, working together." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Working together?" Haven't we been over this? You're all about winging it, and I'm about structure. We're oil and water. Liam smirked faintly, though there was something earnest in his expression. Maybe, but I've also seen what happens when we both try to tackle things solo. We make progress, sure, but not enough. And now, with the event just days away and whoever's been playing us still lurking, do you really think we can afford to keep butting heads? Jasmine hesitated, her grip on the clipboard tightening. He was right, and she hated that he was right. The longer they wasted their energy on petty squabbles, the more damage their unseen rival could do, and the park couldn't afford to fail. She exhaled slowly, her expression softening just a fraction. Fine. Hypothetically, if we were to work together, how would that even look? What exactly are you bringing to the table? Liam grinned, stepping closer. Well, for starters, I've got a knack for storytelling, a killer blog audience, and a way with people that I think even you'd admit is hard to ignore. Jasmine rolled her eyes. Debatable. Okay, fine. I'll prove it. He gestured to the carousel behind them, its chipped paint and flickering lights giving it a tired, melancholy air. Right now, that's just a broken-down ride from the 80s, right? But if we frame it right in the event, play up its nostalgia, its history, it becomes something else entirely, a piece of the park's soul, something people will connect with. Jasmine frowned, glancing at the carousel. She could see his point, even if she wouldn't admit it out loud. Fine, you're good at spinning a story, but that's not enough to get this park ready in time. I'm talking logistics, timelines, coordination. That's where I come in. Exactly, Liam said, his eyes lighting up. You handle the details, make sure the foundations are solid. I'll handle the fluff, the heart, the stuff that sells the experience, divide and conquer. Jasmine studied him for a long moment, trying to detect any trace of insincerity. But for once his smirk was gone, replaced with something that almost looked like determination. She nodded slowly. All right, we try this. But if you go off script or throw my schedule out of whack, I'm pulling the plug. Deal, Liam said, extending his hand toward her. She hesitated briefly before shaking it, his grip warm and firm. It felt oddly like a truce, not just between them, but within herself, like she was finally letting go of the constant need to control every variable. Okay, she said briskly, pulling out her pen and flipping to a blank page on her clipboard. First priority. The kids' zone. That deflated bounce house is an eyesore, and it's supposed to be one of the main attractions. Any ideas? Liam rubbed his chin thoughtfully. What if we lean into the chaos a little? Get some local artists to turn it into a pop-up interactive art piece. Kids love messy paint stuff, right? Call it Rebuild the Castle or something. Jasmine blinked, surprised. That might actually work, but we'll need to coordinate with the artists and get supplies. Leave that part to me, Liam said. I know a few people. They owe me favors. Of course they do, she muttered, but there was no malice in her tone. Next, the vendor permits. They're still not finalized, and the food court is critical. Paperwork is all you, clipboard queen, Liam said, holding up his hands. I know my limits. She smirked faintly. Good to know you're aware of them. They spent the next hour hammering out a plan, their ideas blending in a way that surprised both of them. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the park lights flickered to life, their uneasy truce began to feel like something more, a partnership forged in the chaos and tension of two very different people learning, however reluctantly, to trust one another. As they wrapped up, Liam leaned against a nearby railing, watching Jasmine jot down the final details. You know, he said casually, we might actually pull this off. We will, Jasmine replied confidently, meeting his gaze. Because failure isn't an option, Liam grinned. I'll take it. And, for the first time, their smiles felt like something shared. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the amusement park in a kaleidoscope of glowing colors. String lights crisscrossed the main thoroughfare, their warm bulbs twinkling like fireflies against the deepening twilight. The carousel spun in the distance, its once faded horses now gleaming with fresh paint, their golden manes catching the light. Laughter and music filled the air, mingling with the sweet smells of cotton candy and funnel cakes. The park was alive again, buzzing with energy and warmth. Jasmine stood near the Ferris wheel, clipboard in hand, but for once, she wasn't scribbling notes or scanning her schedule. Instead, she watched the crowds with a rare, unguarded smile. Families strolled past, their faces lit with wonder as children tugged their hands toward the glow of the games and rides. The Rebuild the Castle art project in the kids' area had been a hit, a rainbow of messy handprints now covering the inflatable's once drab exterior. Vendors bustled behind their counters, serving lines of eager guests, their permits secured just in time. Every piece of the night had fallen into place. "You did it," came Liam's voice from behind her. She turned to see him leaning casually against a nearby post, his camera slung over his shoulder, a faint smudge of paint on his shirt from the kids' zone. Though his tone was light, there was a genuine admiration in his eyes. "We did it," Jasmine wanted to say, but the words felt too vulnerable, too raw. Instead, she just nodded. "The park did it," she said, gesturing to the crowds. "They showed up. That's what matters." Liam grinned. "Don't sell yourself short, 14A. You turned this into something more than just an event. You made it magic." She rolled her eyes at the nickname, but couldn't suppress the warmth rising in her chest. "And you," she countered, "managed to capture that magic. I saw the preview of your blog post. The photos, they tell the story perfectly." "Only because the story was worth telling," he said, his voice softer now. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the Ferris wheel as it turned, the lights reflecting off the rippling waters of the nearby pond. Around them, the park seemed to hum with life, a testament to their combined efforts. "Ready for the fireworks?" Liam asked, tilting his head toward the main stage where the crowd had begun to gather. Jasmine smiled. "Always." And together they walked toward the lights. The music floated through the air, a soft, lilting melody that seemed to weave itself into the warm glow of the amusement park lights. Jasmine stood near the carousel, the hum of the crowd fading into the background as she took a moment to just breathe. The night had gone off without a hitch. No last-minute disasters, no chaos. Just laughter, light, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had pulled it off. Enjoying the moment? She turned to see Liam standing a few feet away, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. He wasn't smirking for once, just smiling. A genuine, easy smile that softened the sharp edges of his face. "For once," she admitted, her lips curving upward. "I think I've earned it." Liam stepped closer, his presence both calming and electric at the same time. "You've earned more than that. I mean, look around, Jasmine. This place wouldn't be what it is tonight without you." She glanced at the glowing lights, the families laughing, the park alive in a way it hadn't been in years, and then back at him. "Not without you either," she said softly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The music shifted, the band on stage playing something slower, sweeter. Liam held out a hand, his smile tinged with something almost shy. "Dance with me?" Jasmine blinked, caught off guard. "Here? Now? Why not?" Liam asked, his hand still extended. "Everything else tonight has been unexpected. Why not this too?" She hesitated then, almost before she realized it, placed her hand in his. His fingers were warm against hers, steady as he guided her toward an open space near the carousel. The world seemed to quiet as they moved together, the music wrapping around them like a spell. Liam's hand rested lightly on her waist, his other still holding hers, and Jasmine found herself relaxing into the rhythm, the tension she always carried melting away. "See?" Liam murmured, his voice low and close. "Not so bad to go off script every once in a while." Jasmine laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're insufferable." "Maybe," he said, his gaze locking with hers. "But you're smiling." She was, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like she needed to plan for what came next. Under the glowing lights, they danced, the world narrowing to just the two of them, hearts open, steps in sync, and the promise of something new unfolding between them.